Welcome to another live coaching. We have someone on here that sort of signed up for bigger picture strategy coaching. So I'm going to sort of take him through the process of understanding where he's at and then sort of mapping out a plan for him to sort of achieve his goals depending on what they are. So let's get started. Just want to thank you first for actually even doing this. A lot of people sort of, it's definitely not the easiest thing to be sort of like ripped apart in these videos and sort of get your whole game revealed in front of a lot of people. But basically the main thing here is that like the more open you are, the more straight you are, the more authentic you are, it allows all the other people watching this to sort of connect with your story. And I'm sure that the things that you're struggling with or the things that you need to improve on or the things that you need to work on, everybody like watching is going to have a component of that as well. Okay. So,
Absolutely.
So you essentially, when you sign up for this sort of coaching modality, we have three things. We say either bigger picture strategy, mental game, or specific things like mechanics or tactics, like knowing when to 3-bet. And you selected bigger picture. And whenever, I think we're really good at that at School Cards, like understanding and sort of allowing players to craft and develop a plan that sort of works for them. And in order to do that, we follow something called our Razi model, which stands for resources, objectives, strategy, implementation. So to give you a summary of this, basically what we're doing is we have a certain set of both like financial, cognitive resources. We have objectives, and we take those two things to develop a strategy, and then we implement. And pretty much every single problem in poker can be, or every single problem that players have playing poker can be described along this model. So sometimes players have resources that aren't enough to satisfy the strategy that they laid out, so that when they start to implement and lose, they go broke. Sometimes players' objectives are just wildly not realistic. Sometimes they should be dialed up a little bit more. So that's sort of how we're going to take you through this. And we're going to start with just some general objectives. So first and foremost, just want you to give me a brief overview of like how long you've been playing, what stakes you play, what work you've done on your game so far, and let's start there.
Hey, thanks for the opportunity, Blake. I've been playing poker for probably 25 years, but playing No Limit for maybe 4.
Okay. So what were you playing before that?
Played a lot of limit poker, usually 6-12 to 10-20, back in Minnesota. So where they didn't have No Limit. So when I moved out of that state, then I started playing No Limit. And so I play not that much, maybe between 150 to 200 hours a year. So it's pretty recreational. I've been, over the last 3.5 years, I've averaged about $20 an hour over about 600 hours.
Okay. And that's playing 1-2?
Yeah, playing 1-2 and 2-3.
Okay.
So about 12K over the last 3.5 years. It's, definitely I feel like I'm a winning player, but one of the goals I want is to be able to move up in stakes and feel like, okay, I can do this.
Okay.
What other questions?
As far as work has done, like what books have you read? Like what does your study routines look like? Do you work on your game? Like just give me an overview of that.
When I first started playing, I read every book. I probably had 60 books. I don't know, read them all. A lot of them weren't as applicable since I wasn't playing the limit. Right now, I've been studying not only your videos, but hand deconstruction by different guys online. So do a lot of that. I have a poker buddy here that we talk all the time about hands and strategies. I have not taken any classes, although it's something I definitely want to do.
Okay.
Just my time with regular work and then a musical coaching business that I have, I end up not having the time to invest. And so realistically, I know, okay, that'd be a waste of money if I'm not going to invest the time.
If we think of the resources, like a good sense of sort of your background, how much time do you actually have? Like how much time do you have a week here?
Well, right now I do contract work, so I'm between contracts, so I have more time now. But normally on a normal week where I'm spending, the 40 hours a week at work and everything, I might have 5 to 10 hours a week to play and study, which is, not a lot. But
Okay. Play and study, and I'm assuming like you get one session in.
yeah, usually it'll be one session. It might be. I try not to play more than 4 hours because I've tracked my results based on how long I play, and it gets worse if it's over 4 hours.
That makes sense. Okay. And then
So yeah, go ahead.
what's the goal here? So like what do you want to achieve? What does, what do you want to achieve and what's the timeline really?
Um, right now, I feel like if I can make, I know 20 is a little. It seems unrealistic at 1-2, but that's been the statistics for the last 600 hours. So it's like, well, if I can do that at 1-2, maybe I could make, if I move up to the 2-5 game or something like that, and maybe you could maybe not double it, but maybe head towards $35-40 an hour, and that's that would be that would be awesome because it would definitely supplement the income. And plus, I like the challenge of playing against better people. It's because I learn more every time I'm like, oh, that was a mistake, shouldn't have done that. I see what he was doing there, and so then you learn about that. If you're playing against people that really don't have a clue, you're not learning much.
Right. Right. That makes sense. Well, that's not always true. Like, so I think the whole notion of like, you need to play with better players to get better in poker is somewhat true, but it's all connected to sort of like what your objectives are, right? Like if your objectives are to hit a certain hourly rate over a certain amount of time, you may have different strategies and different approaches. I think the most important thing is establishing your ability to consistently beat the games that you're in first before exploring those things, which it sounds like, all right, so 600 hours is one of those things where it's not a huge sample, but for the most part, if you're averaging around $20 an hour at, your specific game, is this game like a home game or anything? It's in a casino, right?
No, it's two different casinos here.
And are the players you're playing with the same pool of people, or is it just different people all the time?
It's a mix. I would say about 60% are the same players, probably,
Okay,
and then
and
there's
then there's
the
like that come and go.
yeah, yeah,
And the reason why I asked that is like, so when we play online, right? Like you can just produce this large sample so quickly that you can get a sense of like what's working and what's not working, where your game's at, so on and so forth. Live a recreational player live, like you said, it took you 3 years to put 600 hours of volume in. I mean, it takes some time to sort of establish it. So the factors that go into it, for the most part, if players are like $20 an hour at 600 hours, I tend to think that they're doing certain things right, especially over the course of 3 years. Like sort of, but it's sort of not enough to really understand. And the reason why is sometimes like game conditions are such where the players are just bad and you're just playing like a tight, more solid style of poker and you're profiting off of all their mistakes and you don't have all these other aspects to your game.
right,
But you're at the sort of like 10 big blind or 10 big blind an hour rule, which is in a live setting, good. It's very good, right? So
right.
I'd like that number to be like 800 or 1,000 hours or whatever. So the only concern that I have is this, right? Like, so, well, a couple concerns. First and foremost, there is definitely a big difference between, there's not a big difference. It depends on what level of poker you're playing, right? So if you're playing more of a solid, um, a lot of casinos, 1-3 or 1-2 and 2-5 will not always be so recognizable that there's like massive differences. But in some smaller towns, it's like the 2-5 game that runs once or twice a week. It might be, not that prevalent, or there might only be two tables of 2-5. Like, so what is the actual 2-5 situation? Do you have like a lot of games?
Right. And the one casino is a 2-5, and they run quite a few games. The other casino is a 2-3 actually, and they run probably 50% of the 1-2 games. So if there's 4 tables going of the 1-2, there might be 1 or 2 tables going of the 2-3. The other one, they have a 1-3 and a 2-5, and it's probably more equal in terms of the number of tables that they spread. So it's a big town, you know. It's 4 million people, so it's a
Yeah, you're fine. Yeah, it's not that kind of situation. Okay. So before we sort of make certain recommendations here and sort of craft a plan, I'm just going to give you what I call basically like a projective test, which is essentially like people project their understanding and knowledge of this game onto sort of any sort of stimulus. So I can tell you like, I'll give you a hand, or a player opens under the gun, or like what's his range or whatever. Like I can do a lot of things, but all I want you to do is tell me about any hand you recently played and describe it for me. Any hand on the spot.
any hand that I recently played.
Any hand. I could care less what the hand is. I just want you to describe a spot for me.
All right, I had uh, pocket kings in late position. Somebody opened to a normal open at this 1-2 game is like 5 or 6x, and somebody opened to 10, and I made it 35. And this one guy called flop, just one guy. He checked me on a flop of like queen
The
six.
guy that opened called?
Yeah, guy that opened. Yeah, he was the caller. And the flop came down, queen 6-2 rainbow. He checked to me, and I bet about 2/3 pot. And he called, and the turn card was a 10 that made a possible runner flush possible. He checked to me. I bet about half pot, I think, and he check raised me to half his stack, and then he had about half that left, so he check raised me like another 125 on top of that. And having watched him play, it was the second hand he played in 2 hours, and I just knew I was beat. And so I thought about it for a while, and then I folded because I knew I was going to have to play the rest of the money on the river, the rest of his money. And I said out loud, I'm probably supposed to double you up here, but I'm not gonna. And I folded the kings. And
Okay.
after the set, he told me he had a set. So.
Okay, and what hands did you put him on that were beating you?
I actually thought he had pocket sixes. And I thought he had a set, and it's possible. I mean, really unlikely that he was doing this with ace queen suited. I guess theoretically he could have queen 10, and he made 2 pair on the turn, but it just looked to me so suspiciously like he had either sixes or tens or twos. I don't think he had queens, because I think he would have played it a little differently pre-flop if he had queens. So it just looked suspicious to me. Again, knowing this player, I didn't know him, never played with him before, but having watched him for 2.5 hours, and he played 2 hands, this is one of them. It's like I knew I was beat.
Okay. And did you think you played that hand well?
It seemed like I played it straightforward. I don't know if I played it well or not, but but the only thing I thought of was on the turn after he called the bet on the flop. I think I could check back the turn, and it just occurred to me that maybe that was a better line, because if I check back the turn, I might be able to catch him leading, bluff leading on the river when I show that maybe I have ace king or something like that. Maybe he makes a bet on the river and I can call it. So
Okay.
that was the only thought about the way I played the hand.
And my other question is, what other hands are you three betting in that situation besides kings?
Well, definitely any of the premiums. I would also three bet king queen suited. I would also three bet the Broadway suited connectors. I probably would three bet down to eights or nines in that situation, and queen jack suited, king queen suited.
And why that range against this player?
Well, because, well, two reasons. One is there were some people behind who had shown a propensity to call 12. And they'd shown a propensity to come in and definitely wanted to isolate this player in position, as opposed to letting a bunch of players in with who knows what. And so I wanted to play against this guy in position. Now, granted, I would also find out if he had aces or kings, and probably queens. I would guess he would four bet. I mean, I've never played with him before, so I don't know what his four bet range is, but it seemed to me if he just calls, then he's got some sort of pair. He's got maybe ace king, and it should be able to more define his range if I put that three bet in, plus knocking out the guys behind me who definitely would call a small raise. Seemed like it was a good idea.
Okay. All right. So, all right. So based on that, like, let's just tell people are like listening to this, like what I'm looking for. So whenever I ask people these sort of projective questions, one, I'm looking for like errors and sort of problems with your logic or the way you're sort of thinking. And then two, I'm really like paying attention to language, like the words you use, the speed at which
Right.
you can sort of execute and articulate sort of like what you were doing, right? Like, and that sort of gives me a good sense of like where player is at, combined with understanding like what work you've done in your game and so on and so forth. So like you sort of, I mean, you strike me as probably like a decently competent, you know, tighter player who probably like if we were to go back 20 years, you would crush it. Like if we were to take you and go back like 20 years ago, you just like be doing very well in games. And you're probably doing well now off of sort of understanding, you know, how to avoid certain situations and how to go after others. But those are the situations that are sort of on the poles, right? Like when spots are like obvious or not obvious, not that much middle ground. But the big thing sort of that tends to be missing is sort of like processing speed and also just the language. Like poker has just, you know, developed so much as a game that I really believe that, you know, there's sort of this battle between instincts and mechanics, right? Like, and you sort of want to have both. You want to have good instincts for where players are at, but you want to have solid mechanics. So for an example of this is like I bet if I were to ask you, like I believe that if you're going to move up to 2-5, let's say, right, that you should have a solid strategy, or you should know exactly what hands you're sort of three betting in every position and then where you're deviating. So for example, like we have this thing called sort of, you think of your range as something that's fluid and dynamic. It's something that opens and closes, right? So like what hands are you always three betting? Well, so you're always three betting kings. You're always three betting maybe aces. Most players, like 99% of players, every once in a while you'll deviate and call or do something different. But for the most part, you're always raising those hands. And then based on certain game conditions and based on certain sort of dynamics, you can expand that range to include other things, right? And there's sort of a minimum and maximum at which you could expand. So
Right.
there's factors like, you know, if you're playing like 100 big blind poker, like you can't really expand that often all the time, depending on the game conditions, right? Like that's why 100 big blind poker is like not the most exciting thing in the world because it's not like 200, 300 when you're sitting with a lot of chips behind you and you can sort of have more maneuverability post flop and all these other things. So first and foremost, I think that you're probably doing a lot of things right. I do think that you probably would be, I don't know, I sometimes I'm wrong, but I have a good hunch of after talking to players for like thousands of hours at this point, you'd probably be like, I'd say like 25 to 30 an hour at 2.5. I just get that a feeling. Like I'm willing to bet like 5K that if we put you at a 25 F2.5 game, that's what would happen. But it's by no means crushing the games. Like you're sort of staying within your comfort zone, right?
Right.
And you also have another problem with just your volumes. It's not considerable enough to really start to make sort of side income. It's an issue. A lot of players, like, you need to understand that if you want to take this game seriously, I think the minimum is like 600 hours a year. It's very difficult to, so you should have gotten the volume that you got in the past 3 years in 1 year. Right. And the reason why is certain mechanical skills, certain application, it's not going to come over. You have to play, study, play, study, play, study. And like for your game, I feel like you're probably on this, I don't know, you can go left or right. Like, I think you definitely need to rebuild and sort of establish a more modern understanding of the game. If you want to really crush those levels and do really well at 2.5, but it's sort of like, I don't know, like, if you only have 10 hours a week, it doesn't really make that much sense. Like, I think that that's going to require in the neighborhood of like 5 to 7 hours a week of work. And then like another 10 hours of playing, which is like, 15 hours a week, which is a lot different than sort of like what you're in right now. And then as far as like bankroll requirement, do you have a role?
Yeah, it's about 4 to 5K right now.
Okay. So, and do you take money out of it and use it for things or no?
Generally not. Once in a while, something special comes up, like a trip to Paris. Took a couple K out to go.
Okay. So like, so you're sort of in this weird trap, and I call this a trap all the
Yeah,
time. Players, I've done like 10 of these, and everybody has their own versions. We're always in a trap, right? But sometimes the trap is real, sometimes it's imagined, and yours is sort of like, it's a real trap in the sense that if you have a 5K roll, right, and you're only playing, let's say you really dial it up and you play like 10 hours a week. And let's say you do quite well and you're doing 10 hours a week. Let's say you jump to, you can't jump to 2.5 yet, but let's say you play 1.3, 1.2, I'm sorry. And let's say you're doing $20 an hour and you're playing 10 hours a week. You're making $200 a week. That means you're making $800 a month. That means
right.
by the end of the year, we have 10K. So like by the end of the year, we start to have enough money to sort of play 2.5. So we're talking about like very like long sort of goals, right? And there's, I hate the term bankroll. I've spoken about this. I think it's one of the most stupid things in the world, because what happens is that a bankroll, the way players talked about it, the way it was indoctrinated, it's an amount of capital that when you're making your decisions of what to play and how to play based on that amount of capital, right? So if I had $100,000 behind me and I was playing 5-10, it'd be a lot different if I had 100K versus I had like 15K. My strategies would differ. And a lot of players make this mistake of saying like my role, but they don't really model out like, all right, if I'm playing a bankroll based approach to poker where I'm making decisions based on my role, it's going to take me 3.5 years to accomplish my goals, right? Or like 4.5 years to accomplish my goals. So the reality is, if you put 10 hours in your, let's say you're not even putting 10 hours a week though, right?
Right.
Yeah. Like the number's more like what? Like 5?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, if you put 5 hours a week in your game and, let's say you're doing well, I mean, it's going to take 2.5, 3 years to get to the level of where you're sort of feel comfortable. And this is where I tell a lot of players that like, it's, my job is not to like tell you what's right for you or tell you what, my job is just like you say I'm at A and I want to be at B, and I tell you if the path is realistic or not. Like that's kind of what we do here, right? Like, so it's like, all right, if you're at point A and you're point B and you actually want to what's the timeline where you think it's reasonable? And also, like, a lot of players don't get this. The timeline is so damn important because some people could be like, yeah, Blake, I'm retiring in 10 years. For the next 5 years, I'm fine with that 200. And then I'll start to jump up to more and get it. And then some people are like, if I wasn't playing 2.5 in 3 years, I think I'd lose my shit. Like, so it's important to know sort of on that trajectory, like how long, like it's, for example, like I'm going to want to learn piano at some point. I've always wanted to learn piano. Right. And, when I dedicate myself to something, I'm very obsessive. I'm very serious. I'm going to want to have some sort of like mechanic understanding of reading notes. And I'm going to want to be able to do fairly well on a piano. If they're going to tell me, like, based on your sort of trajectory, it's going to take an hour a day and it's going to take 6 years, I'm going to be like, I don't want to learn how to play piano. And the reason why is it's just, I can't do that. Right. If they're like, yeah, you put in an hour a day for the next, 3 or 4 months, you might be able to play a couple of tunes or whatever. I'm like, all right, let's see what that's like.
Sure.
So are you okay with that sort of milestone? Like, what's your thoughts around that?
Well, first of all, my poker buddy's a piano teacher, so I can hook you up.
Cool.
He's really good. Anyway, I would love to be able to. I mean, I'm getting close to retiring too, and it's like I would love to amp up the game. And I'm thinking, okay, so if I triple my time, let's say I'm only working half time now, so I've got triple the hours I can spend on poker because I love the game and I think I can do pretty well at it. I would love to amp those numbers up and start playing higher. I guess that's that's why I picked big picture, because I wanted to know, okay, so if I were able to invest 3 times the amount of time, what does that trajectory look like?
15 hours a week?
Yeah, I mean, so 15 to 20 hours a week. So let's say I could spend, say, 15 to 20 hours a week on studying the game
I mean, it speeds everything up. The problem is that, you got to understand that if you're really taking this like bankroll based approach, you're not taking that money out. So you're working on your game, you're playing, and then you're not actually using it. So I don't know what your finances are like, but usually if you like drop one area of income and you bring in another area of income, it doesn't, you know what I mean? Like, so
right.
the overarching goal for the school cards curriculum really is to get players to crush 2.5. That's our grounding goal. Like, we want our players north of like 12 big blinds an hour at 2.5. So like $60 an hour, 2.5. A lot more if you're playing like 5.5 or 2.5 with 1K behind you or whatever. Now, the reason why I say that is, and why it's not 5.10 or whatever, is because most of all, there's not that many 5.10 games in the country. Like, if you really look at the distribution or the game access to games, it's like you're not going to walk into your casino on a Tuesday and have well, maybe in it's funny because in New York, in the East Coast, Tuesday is like a big stakes game, but like on a Wednesday, you're not going to walk into a casino and find that any other time. So you're going to have these games that happen once in a while, and the game selection may not be so amazing, and it might be, really good players, or, so that's why like 2.5 is the operational sort of like quote unquote goal. But it works. It's a lot easier. I'll tell you this right now. It's a lot easier if you have like 20K behind you.
Right.
It's just so much easier to sort of make that work. And what you need to always do whenever you're in this spot, this is for everyone, where you're and you're in an interesting situation where it's like, I definitely think you need a lot of work to do on your game and all that to get you to another level. But like, you could still probably profit the way that you're playing now. Also, being older really helps. Like, just for the most part, players that are like above the age of 40 are just having stronger mental games and stronger approaches. Like, if you were like 20, I would say no way in hell. Like, there's all these factors that contribute towards me giving you like the recommendation on like what to do. But you need to sort of optimize around hourly rate. So one of the mistakes that players make is that they're like, oh, I'm going to grind this, 5K roll to 15K or 20K, and then I'm going to play 2.5. And I'm like, all right, like, why would you play poker with an hourly rate that's like lower than what you make it? It just doesn't make any sense sometimes. So that's why when you're establishing core mechanics, you got to say to myself, all right, is it worth it for me to actually play for $20 an hour to build that role? Or do I make more money in my other pursuits that I can sort of, all right, I'm going to play poker. I'm going to bring in some money. I'm going to have, this plan where I'm going to have money coming from whatever I do for work and money coming from a little bit of poker. I'm going to accelerate the amount of money that I have for my role. And then I'm going to use that money to propel myself to the next level. Because the goal is really to have a solid enough bankroll at 2-5 to the point of where you have a role, you can deal with the ups and downs of the games, and you can take out money. Right. And like that's so is like, and 20 an hour is on average. Like I would assume that you're probably, I don't know, maybe you're running a little good, or I don't know, whatever. Let's say that you're really like at 16 or 15 an hour or 14
Right.
in that neighbor. Like, is that worth it? Is that going to be enough of a grind for the next year? Or is it like I make more money doing what I regularly do?
So I definitely make more money doing what I regularly do, but the goal would be to increase the poker rate to where it's more than making what I regularly do. I mean, that's always kind of been in the back of my head, like, man, that would be a hard way to make an easy living, to be able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is the time and the money that's required to do that, right? So like you're already doing really good at, like, if you're making 20 hours at 1-2, you're doing good at 1-2. So the obvious thing is to sort of just move up to 2-5, right? It makes sense.
Right.
The problem is the game could be a little bit different. Take two bad days or two bad sessions, that's 20% of your roll.
Yeah.
So and this is where risk tolerance and a lot of other factors come. Like if I were you right now, I'd be like, let's go 2-5, let's play 5K roll, let's run it up. And I'd play a very tight style of poker till I get to 7K, and then I would start to open up. Like I would have like a stepping sort of like a ladder. But that's because I have a high tolerance for risk, and that's because I've always been like that. And if I lost to 5K, I'd be like, okay, whatever, I'll work my job and make it. So like, it really depends on what. So when I tell people like, all right, you're making a plan, it's like, what is the exact amount of money? Like if you have that 5K roll and you lost it in 3 weeks, would you be devastated? Would it be fine? Like, where would you be?
I wouldn't like it, but it's not going to mean I'm out on the street or anything. So yeah.
Right. But like, what would that mean for you in poker? Would you have to like take
well, I mean, I'd have to, like you say, okay, going to earn that money back somewhere else, doing my coaching or doing my regular job, and put some money away, take a month off or however long it takes to rebuild that back up to something where I could play. And it's happened in the past, it's years ago, it's a couple different times where I busted and was like, okay, I got to take some time off poker because I don't have a roll. And so then I built it back up. And I think if you haven't done that, you're probably lying.
No, everybody has. Yeah. I mean, I've done it like 10 dozen times. I don't even know how many times I've done that.
So, yeah, it's happened in the past, and devastated is definitely not the word. It would be like, shit, that was not good. But
yeah, I think there's just this sort of like, there's this big jump between when you play poker. Like I always I say I have this really cool framework that when I'm coaching people in the pro group, I'm like, there's a difference between playing poker for fun versus playing poker for profit versus playing poker for income. Those are three different, completely different worlds. Like when you're playing poker for fun, have fun. If don't sit there and fold all the time, like force players to make tough spots, get yourself involved, like do whatever you need to do to have fun. Understand that you have $500 that you spend on poker a month and enjoy yourself and take it fucking easy. Like that's kind of how I sort of describe it. When you're playing poker for profit and whatever that profit means, we always want to make the most obviously sort of EV decision, but that's actually the best way to describe it. We want to make money, right? There's a certain level of skills that we have to develop. Like we need to understand mechanically what we're doing. We need to have the sort of instincts at the table to make the right decisions. We need to have a decent enough mental game. Then you move into the other area, which is income. And that's a completely different beast because it requires just so much competency and so much planning. So it's like, number one, is my game good enough to consistently make decisions at the table? The first answer is you don't know. None of you know. No one knows. You need to be evaluated. Like you need a peer group. You need people around you that are keeping you in check. But let's assume it is. It's like all those factors in place that are allowing me to consistently show up at the table, play my highest form of game, and sort of deal with the variance, right? Like, so that's why I'm saying like income is just a completely different beast. Now, what you could do, so like, let's assume that your game was 100% ready, which I don't know if it is. But let's say it was 100% ready. I thought mechanically you were solid. Like, yeah, you could definitely be 2.5. Like, what I would basically do is I would dial it up to like 20 hours a week immediately at 1-2. And I would sort of say, all right, I'm going to start taking systematic shots at 9K. So when you go from 5, so when you increase your roll, basically when you double your roll almost, then I would start to play 2.5, right? I would just jump in, sort of see how you do with that 9K. And remember, this is because I'm saying like I think you're actually a mechanically solid player. And you know, like I get in some of the, you guys have seen like in some of these YouTube videos, the people are freaking nuts. Like they've never won. They have been playing poker for like 3 years, and they're like, I'm gonna jump to 2.5. No, you're not. You're gonna lose all your money. But like you've been around for 20 years. You sort of, 600 hours is not a lot, but if you put in a couple of things, I think that's a good that's a good thing to sort of look forward to.
Yeah.
And I would basically, when you're at 8K, I would play a certain style or a certain approach to poker that is a little bit less, or 9K, a little bit less variance, a little bit more focused on value. And I would sort of ride that train from like 9, almost like 9 to 20. And then in that period from 9 to 20, you do a lot of work on your game so that you can get yourself to the level of where you're really crushing it. Because I still think it'd probably be like maybe 30 an hour at 2.5, right? Like even if you were just, I know it seems weird. Like people are like, it seems very weird of like how the hell would I know that, right? And it's like there's so much variance in poker, and there's so much thing. It's just, so one of the things we do is we track everybody. So like I track all of our private clients, I track all of the people in our pro group, and everybody's sending me data on hourly rates, like how much they're making. And I talk to these people, and I've been doing this for 12 years. So I just get a good sense of like, all right, I think he's solid enough to this, but not on that. Like, are you the kind of player that can sit there and completely deconstruct a range and understand what's, optimal sizing in this spot? Definitely not. But can you say, I'm beat here, I'm going to fold? Yes, that's sort of what your pocket king situation sort of showed me, right? And the fact that out of all the hands that I asked you, you picked that hand shows that you sort of have probably some sort of badge of honor in making the right folds, right? Like, so a lot of players might have switched that up, and like it would have been a thin call on the river, or it would have been like a spot where, they got it. Most 90% of people who ask me, who's like, it really is that high. I'm like, tell me a hand. They tell me a hand that was played so straight up and so basic, and then they lost. That's 90% of people. So I raised with aces. I got 3-bet. They called. Flop came 2-9-6. I bet they called. Turn was a 2. I bet they called. River was a 7. I mean, I went all in. They called, and they showed me quads. Like, it's like, oh, okay. Like that's sort of, so just the fact that you went there. So, because when people are hearing this, I don't want them to think that like, oh, I'm just like guessing. Like there really is a lot of intuition. There really is a lot of sort of work that I've done. And I've just looked at all this data that I do really get a good sense. And I can just tell when a player is losing, when a player is winning, and when a player is like crushing, So I do feel that I don't know. I just get a sense that you're good enough for that. I still would want you to test it. So like the plan I would do for you is like, all right, you want to dial up what's going on? Dial it up. Let's really start to feel what it is to play poker 20 hours a week. And that is something that's different. So a lot of players that are playing like smaller amounts, like, yeah, 5 hours, you look forward to it. You're sort of excited. You're like, I can't wait to play. Start dialing it up to 10 to 20, and then all of a sudden 25 to 30, and then have 2 weeks where things don't go your way. And you might be like, I fucking hate this game. Like, I can't stand poker. So I think it's really important, if we're really going to even entertain this thing of like, all right, I'm going to actually start playing poker for income. Let's put it on a trial. Let's sort of see what you feel like. Do you love it? Do you, so this is what I would call my first step for you would be what I call a sprint. It's not what I call sprint. Sprints are in tech culture. They're sort of coordinated times where we get a lot of work done. So yeah. I would do almost like a 45-day volume sprint. And I would really try to maintain 20 hours per week for 45 days. So 20 hours a week for 6 weeks, right? So essentially what you're saying is in 6 weeks, you're putting in, like 40% of the volume that you put in 3 years, right?
Right.
So 8, 16, 24, not 40%, but like half, right? Or close to half. So that will be a really good sense. And sort of, I will know where you're at after that 6 week sprint, right? So, like, based on how you describe that journey, based on sort of how you describe the ups and downs of the game, and if you do that sprint, and you're like, you know what, Blake, I did again. I made 16.50 an hour over that time. I really enjoyed it. I had a great time. I definitely think this is something that I'm excited about doing 20 hours a week for the foreseeable future. I'd be like, now we're talking. Like, okay, like now we're in an area where it's like time to craft out, like, this is what you need to work on. This is what you need to play. These are the actual structural timelines. But I'm not big about making these like big ambitious plans without actually having that core step one. And this is your step one. And this is everybody out there. If you think about, I get a lot of emails, Blake, I don't need your course. I'm already doing well, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay, fine. Like, if you think you can do it on your own, that's 100% fine. Go out, do this thing for 6 weeks and see where you're at. I never hear from them again. Like, they just, they disappear. And I think it's really important. It's like, poker's a rough game. I would never in a million years want to play for more than 40 hours a week. Versus, I could just never do it. I did it when I did 60, 70, 80. I was nuts when I was young. But after a while now, it's just like, my whole life has been poker for the past 12 years. It gets to you a little bit. Like, I want to talk about other things instead. You know what I mean? So I really do feel at 20 hours a week, that's the sort of sweet spot. So if you're not really enjoying yourself for 20 hours a week or it's bothering you, then it's like, all right, we might want to recalibrate what we're doing. So that would be like my first step for you, is that 6 weeks, 20 hours a week sprint, sort of reevaluate after that, see where you're mentally at, see where the finances at, see where the application's at. And if that's the case, I think, temperament wise and approach wise, you definitely have a shot to sort of start to take this a hell of a lot seriously. I think our best program is the pro group for that, which is basically all people playing 2-5 either for a living or for part-time income. And it's basically like an accountability group. So it's a group of people. We sort of keep people on a leash where before every session, you have to fill out a document and send it to us. And then after every session, you're breaking it down. So we know where everybody's at all times. So like if you have a 2-swing or 3-swing downswing, not downswing. I hate calling. If you lose 3, let me just get to it. If you lose 3 sessions in a row, it's not a downswing. You just lost 3 sessions in a row. Like there's a lot of things that players don't understand, but we'll be able to look at those 3 sessions and be like, that was a mistake. That was a mistake. That was a mistake. Get off the table. You need to work on these things. Or that sucks. That sucks. Are you fine? Yep. Go back and play. Right. So it's just sort of a high level of accountability. And I really don't believe that people can, I don't think it is possible. It's very rare, in my opinion, to make it long-term and make income without accountability. I'm not saying that you need to do a pro group, but like you should have like 3 or 4 players that are high level, that understand the game and that are working on it. And then last but not least, when you do decide to work on poker for an income, this is sort of, you need to go down your own personal development track for the game. So this is when we need to start to sort of bring you up to speed on sort of modern approaches. Right. And this is where like it's important to invest money. And it's not just us, we have a great curriculum for that, but there's also like, Solve for Why has some great stuff. But it's important to invest in your game. And the reason why is when you're playing for an income, you're taking this game seriously, you need to understand what the hell other players are thinking about, right? So like that's one of the benefits of the sort of the way because I'm so in poker education, I know the various camps and I know how people approach it. So I sit down with a player, it doesn't take that long to be like, all right, I kind of understand how this player is constructing their ranges. If you don't understand the material from other camps, you don't get it. You don't really understand how they're approaching the game or how they're doing things. So but I would first test it to yourself before I would really make like the investment of like, I'm going to do this. So that's why I said a 6-week thing would be a really good sort of sprint for you. And then you could be like, all right, you know what? Let's put together some more money. Let's, I don't know, take it from savings or whatever, and let's make this work. Because if you do, if $50 an hour at 2.5 as retirement income is great. It's great. And it's basically our entire demographic. Like the whole joke is like the mean age of the pro group is like 43 or something. Why? I don't let people in if they're under 30. So if you're under 30, you're not allowed in. I've let 2 people in under 30 against my, like, I was like, all right, I see myself in them. Both of them didn't work out. Right? Because it's just, not to bash all you youngins, but like I was there, I was a basket case. Like the average person under the age of like 25 or 20, just not ready to listen. They're just not ready to have the financial stability to actually make this work. They want to drive, they want to force outcomes, and some of them have been successful, but most of them aren't. So that's why I'm like, if you're above the age of 40, it's a major plus in my, based on our data. Yeah, but that's sort of my, I wouldn't even want to give you like, oh, I think you should do this, I think you should do that. I really do believe that that's your next step. You had 600 hours of poker in the past, 3 years. If we want to look at income, we got to make that, let's put 240 in the next 6 weeks. And the only tip I have is like, I would get some accountability on that. Are you married? Do you have kids?
No kids. I have a girlfriend.
Okay. So I would just get accountability with the girlfriend and be like, listen, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to be playing poker for 6 weeks. This is my schedule. And I would literally plan out, I'm playing Thursday to Friday, boom, 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 boom. Cause that's sort of like, we take this shit very seriously. Like at School of Cards, like, man, I started this company as like just teaching people how to play, like, what's the difference between a straight and flush? And then it gravitated towards like, this is not how to lose. Right. And then it was like, all right, this is actually how to be profitable in a live game. And now it's like, if you want to make money playing poker, we need to take this very seriously. So we want schedules, we want accountability, we want all the structures in place. Sort of like what you would do for your students, like, all right, this is the goal, this is how we're going to do it. So that's what I would do. I would map out 6 weeks. This is going to be my schedule. This is what I'm going to play. These are the hours I'm going to play. You can play 4-hour sessions. Oh, one last weird thing that comes up. How far are you from the casino?
10 minutes.
Amazing, right? That's amazing.
Yeah.
Reason why I ask is because you can't play 4-hour sessions if you're an hour away, right? Like, no, the fact that you're 10 minutes away is just a major, major plus for you. You can just get in the car and get there. So I would do it.
It makes it easy because you can say, hey, this is not going well. I hate this lineup. I'm going home, instead of trying to grind it, whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And also just, you can't play 1-2 if you have to, like, California is like the biggest trap. Their rakes are so ridiculous that the rakes are so high in some of these places. They're like, somebody was telling me like they're driving an hour to play. They're grinding like 1-2 or 1-3 or whatever it is for like 6 hours. I'm like, dude, you lost money even if you won. Like based on the commute, based on the time, if we factor it out, you probably are like making negative 250 an hour. Right. So I don't want players to ever be in that trap too. All of you guys, you need to know your rake structures. You need to know how long you get there. You need to know how long is gas. Like you need to understand that if you're actually going to play poker for income. You want to play for fun? Who the fuck cares? Just go out there, enjoy yourself. But there's just like a big difference in mindset and approach when playing fun for profit, fun for income. And you sound like somebody that wants to do it for income. So that's what I do. I'll hold you accountable right now. Send me a screenshot of a calendar. It doesn't matter when you decide to choose it. It's your decision. So this could be next week. This could be in 3 weeks. I mean, I don't care. But send the calendar. Send it to me. This is what I'm going to do, and then basically the end of every week, send me an update. And all I want to do is answer 3 questions. How many hours did you put in? What your hourly rate was? 2, just give me an overview of what you think your play was like. I played well. I don't think I made any big mistakes. I didn't mean big errors, whatever. 3, give me 1 or 2 hands that you played. And then 4th, this is really important. What was your mental state like? I enjoyed it, Blake. I loved it. I could type that up for you after.
All right.
All right, and you're just gonna send me a screenshot. You're gonna show me where it's at, and we're gonna see sort of how it went. And then maybe I think this will be great. We'll do another one of these and like follow up with you in 6 weeks. So it's gonna be part one. Because I mean, like I think this is so valuable. Like so many players have these ambitions. So many players, want to do that, and there's a very structured way of doing this that when you do it, it works. Because the whole point is you always need a plan. If everything, poker is a game where everything can go to shit really quickly. Like you can, like people don't understand that, and like think about it this way: like, even the best hand in the game, like it's not like like pre-flop. If you have aces, like it's not like you're winning 99.9% of the time. Like this is a game that's based on a foundation of not certainty. So if that's the case, our approach to the game wants to have so much structure to it that we feel solid when all this stuff doesn't work. Right. Like, and that's why I'm so big on frameworks and accountability and structure and all that stuff. Cause it's sort of like, imagine you were teaching me piano and like I'm learning, and then all of a sudden every once in a while someone comes out and just starts shooting me with the paintball gun and like moves the piano. Like that's what it's like to play poker, and it's trickier than most players give the game credit for. And as long as you have a structure, you can go back to that structure and be like, okay, interesting. In week 1, I did really well and I felt great about myself. In week 2, I lost a little and I felt terrible. Oh my God, I'm sort of connecting my performance with my thing. And you can start to evaluate it. Without that structure, it is nearly impossible. And we'll see how you do, and we'll sort of check in on you. I think that'll make the most sense.
All right.
All right. Do you have any other general questions, logistics on how you would want?
When you say together a schedule, you just want a daily schedule, or you want like I'm going to play from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Or
Yeah. I want to schedule. I want Tuesday 2 to 4, Wednesday 2 to 4, Friday 2
right.
to 4, whatever it is, so that we hit that 20-hour goal and it's actually real. And you could adjust it. I mean, life's going to happen. Things are going to happen. But listen, I had to put in 16 hours this week because I was a little bit tired. But we want some sort of plan. And the reason why is you told me 20. It might be more like 10. It might be more like 12. So we always want to get grounded with reality. We want to know what the reality is. So, so, so important. That's why I'm so obsessed with tracking. Like all these players, how much you make? Oh, I'm kind of profitable. What the hell does that mean? Like every single person watching this video right now, within a couple of minutes, should be able to open a phone, open something, and be like, you know what? I make 1023 an hour over the course of the last 1,000 hours. If you don't know what that number is, you're just not operating from reality, right? So same thing with volume, same thing with all that stuff.
Yeah, that was really the only question I wanted to know, how specific you wanted the schedule.
Yeah, and this will be a test, and then I'll ask you questions about this, and we'll sort of get to understand sort of what the next steps is after you go through 6 weeks.
Love it.
All right. Great, sir. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks a lot, Blake.
All right, man. Have a good one.
All right, you too.
Bye. All right. So interesting one. Definitely some interesting themes here. Some interesting things that sort of came. All right. So definitely an interesting one. This is something that a lot of players sort of want to do. They want to take this game seriously. And please, like, if there's one sort of feedback I can give you from this video, is that, like, number one, I know I'm being like overtly cautious about saying like my instincts around what players may. I do have that ability because of so much data and work. I don't want you to think that I just like, oh, I think you can make 30 an hour. I believe I'm very good at that in live cash games. Okay. And the second thing is, like, you really all need to understand that there's a big difference between playing poker for fun, for profit, and for income. If there's one sort of takeaway you can get, it's that. And also, guys, if you ever want to prove yourself, like, create a plan and prove it. So if you're like, can I do this? Set out a plan, make a little 6-week sprint. Say I'm going to play 2 hours each day or 5 hours a day or whatever it is, and sort of create a plan and see if it's right or wrong, or see if it worked out or not. And you always want to check in on those 3 things. Like, what's the reality of your profit? How much money are you actually making? How's your mental state? Are you actually enjoying playing this game, or are you bitter and annoying? And then you could start to craft like a real objective. We never want to say, oh, I'm going to make money playing poker. Oh, I'm going to be professional, without some staging ground. And this for him is just a first testing ground, like his first 6-week sprint. He'll have to do another 3-month one at some point. And then after that, I'll sort of be like, all right, let's start to put something together that's more comprehensive. But anyways, hope that was helpful. Any questions or anything like that, post below. If you want to be on this show, make sure you fill out the assessment. Maybe we can get you on, sort of select people for different things, and anything else, as always, reach out.